Hey guys, so for today's video, I'm going to go over some of my favorite eyeshadow tips and tricks for beginners. So if you are new to eyeshadow or just need some little helpful tips, this video is perfect for you. I'm going to walk you through exactly how I did this eyeshadow look up close and personal and give you all of my favorite tips and tricks. So if that sounds good, go ahead and keep on watching. Okay, while this video isn't necessarily about the eyeshadow palette that I'm using, I wanted to let you know I'm using my eyeshadow palette with Sigma, and my palette is currently at 20% off on their website for their semi-annual sale. A ton of their brushes and other products are up to 75% off right now, which is a crazy savings. And if you use my code AngelaBright, you'll save an additional 10%. So definitely check out Sigma because I will be using their brushes today and my palette. All right, let's dive into my tips and tricks for beginner eyeshadow application. Personally, when I do my eyeshadow, I like to have my eyebrows done first just because I feel like eyebrows really frame your face and it kind of gives me a guideline of where I want my eyeshadow to be. And depending on the eyeshadow look that I'm doing, if I'm doing a really intense eyeshadow look where I'm using a lot of eyeshadows, maybe some darker shadows, I will do my eyes first and then my base makeup. But because today I'm going to be doing more of a natural look, I did do my foundation and concealer first. But most of the time I do recommend to do your eyes first just in case you get any fallout on your face, you're not going to ruin your base makeup. Now the first thing for eyeshadow application is that you always want to use an eyeshadow primer. Always, always, always. Like, do not skip this step. Even if you're doing the easiest eyeshadow look ever with only like 2 eyeshadows, you still want to prime your eyes. There's been times where I've tried to skip this step and my eyeshadow just never looks as good. So eyeshadow primer does so many things. First of all, it makes your eyeshadow just simply apply easier. It makes your eyeshadow last longer. It makes the colors even more vibrant and pigmented. Like, this is a necessary step that I think everyone needs to do. So I have a couple eyeshadow primers that I really like and I've been using for years. The first one being the Rare Beauty eyeshadow primer. I like this primer a lot because it's more hydrating and it has a tint to it that covers up any redness and discoloration on your eyelids. Another one I really like is the classic Urban Decay primer potion. They do have a couple variations of this primer, but I just stick with the original one, and this one does have a slight tint to it, but it is less tinted than the Rare Beauty one. But if you want a cheap drugstore option, I do really like the Essence Prime Like a Boss eyeshadow base. This eyeshadow primer is clear, so it doesn't have any kind of tint or base to it, so I'd recommend putting on a little bit of concealer on your eyelids before you put on this eyeshadow primer. So this first one is the Rare Beauty primer, next is the Urban Decay one, and then this is the Essence one. So for this video, I'm going to use the Urban Decay primer potion. So I'm just going to cover my entire eyelid, and you want to make sure to get all the way into the inner corner and the outer corner. And I do really like how this eyeshadow primer has an applicator with it, so it's really easy to apply. And you can use either a finger or a brush to blend this out. Since I have no nails on today, I'm just going to use my finger. And again, you want to make sure you blend on the outer corner and the inner corner. Now I am going to take a loose translucent powder to set my eyelids, and for that I'm going to use the e.l.f. Halo Glow Powder in Light. And I just like to pick up some of this on a fluffy brush. This is a Sigma E35, and I'm just going to dust that on my entire eyelid. So by setting your eyeshadow primer, it's going to help your eyeshadow not crease throughout the day, and it's going to give your brush something smooth to glide on when you're blending out the eyeshadows. Okay, now my eyes are prepped and they are ready for eyeshadow. My next eyeshadow trick is to actually start on the eye that you struggle with the most. So for me, that's my right eye. My left eye is so easy for me to do, like I just naturally want to start on this side, but by starting on the side that I struggle with, it makes me really focus on what I'm doing, and it helps me not to rush through the eyeshadow application. My next eyeshadow trick is to use smaller brushes. So often I see people going with these big fluffy brushes that are usually too big for people's eyes, and it just gives you kind of a messy application. Smaller eye brushes are just going to make it easier to do your eyeshadow, especially if you have small or even hooded eyes. So I have an eyeshadow brush set with Sigma that has 5 of my go-to eye brushes, and 3 of them are really small blending brushes, which are perfect for everyone to do their eyeshadow with. So those 3 brushes are the E33, the E27, and the E42. Smaller brushes just let you have way more control over the eyeshadow application. So for most eyeshadow looks, you want to start with the transition shade that is 1 to 3 shades deeper than your skin tone. If you want to go for a really easy eyeshadow look, you can apply just a transition shade in your crease and be done, or you can add more shadows on top of it. The transition shade also gives me a guideline for the rest of my eyeshadow because typically the transition shade is the highest shade that you're going to place in your crease, so you kind of know not to blend any other eyeshadows higher than that shade. For my transition shade, I'm going to take Basic from my eyeshadow palette on a Sigma E25. So on this brush, I'm going to pick up Basic, and you always want to tap off the eyeshadow on your brush. Tapping off the eyeshadow will reduce the amount of fallout you get on your face and your cheeks, and it helps ensure that you're using the right amount of product. And remember, you can always add more eyeshadow, but it's really hard to take away eyeshadow. So I also want to show you how I'm holding the brush. So I'm holding the brush pretty close to the end of it. If you hold the brush really close to the front, it's going to give you really harsh lines, and it's really hard to get that nice kind of back and forth motion because you're like just gripping it, you know? So I'm left-handed, and this is how I hold the brush, with my thumb, my pointer, and my middle finger. And see how holding it this way just gives me a lot of motion to be able to blend the brush as I'm doing my eyeshadow. You want your brush to be able to glide back and forth, and you really just can't do that when you're holding the brush so close to the tip. So like I said, I'm gonna start on the side that I struggle with, which is my right eye, and I'm just gonna start to wiggle this shade in my crease with back and forth motions. And when I'm doing my eyeshadow, I'm usually looking slightly down into a mirror, and I like to do a mixture of windshield wiper motions like this, but also small little circles while moving my brush throughout my crease. I am going to pick up more of the same shade on my brush, and again, I'm going to tap off the excess shadow. And where you place the brush down first is where you're going to have the most amount of pigment. So you can see I'm starting in the center of my crease and then blending towards the inner crease and the outer crease. And when you're blending your eyeshadow, try not to raise your eyelids super duper high. If you have hooded eyes, this is super important because you're not walking around all day like this where people can see your shadow. You know, when you're talking to someone, your face is usually pretty relaxed. And so by doing your eyeshadow with your face relaxed, you kind of get to see what it's going to look like throughout the day. I'm going to go ahead and do my other eye. And again, I'm holding the brush towards the base, so I have lots of room to wiggle the brush. And I'm using a pretty light hand too. I'm not pressing down hard and wiggling like this. I'm doing a very light touch. Now I'm going to switch to a smaller brush because I'm going to apply eyeshadow on my lid. The brush I was using is the E25, and now I'm going to use the E27, which is literally just a smaller version of the E25. And I'm taking more of that transition shade on the flat side of the brush, tapping off the shadow. And I'm going to place my brush on the outer part of my lid and kind of wiggle it back and forth to get some eyeshadow out here. And you want to blend this eyeshadow up into the crease to meet your transition shade that you put in the crease. So again, I'm placing my shadow down first where I want the most pigment, which is on my lid, and then just wiggling my brush back and forth. I also wanted to mention, if you don't have a transition shade, your bronzer will usually work pretty well for this step, because typically your bronzer is 1 to 3 shades darker than your skin tone. Alright, so there's how the eyes look like with just the transition shade, and like I said earlier, you can totally stop here if you want to do a super simple eyeshadow look. It just kind of adds a little bit of definition to the eyes, but I do want to add a little more depth to my look. So I'm going to take a deeper brown shade. This is Schmoogala from my palette, and again, I'm going to take it on the E27. So again, just picking up shadow on the flat side of the brush like that. As always, tapping off the excess. And I'm going to lightly stamp this shade on the same spot on the outer part of my lid. And bringing it up into the crease. And because my eyes are slightly hooded, I'm going to relax my face, kind of look straight forward, and make sure I get this shade a little bit above this little fold that's happening, just so you can see this eyeshadow when my face is relaxed. So again, placing the brush down where I want the most pigment, and just doing small little motions. And because I'm using a really small brush, this is pretty easy to do. So my next little eyeshadow trick is probably my favorite, and I do it every single time I do my shadow, and that is taking a very light eyeshadow that pretty much matches my skin tone, and I use that to blend out the edges. So for that, I'm going to take Bare from my palette on a Sigma E33, and I'm going to pick up this shade on the tip of the brush, like that. And I like to use this light shadow around the edges of my transition shade. So for this, I'm still using a super light hand. I'm holding my brush really far away from the bristles, and I'm just wiggling right below my eyebrow. So I am going above that transition shade, and this is just going to smooth out all of the edges and really give you that seamless look. You can also use a face powder for this step, again something that matches your skin tone. My next eyeshadow trick is to purchase a Sigma switch, or just something you can easily clean your brushes off on to switch between eyeshadows. So that's exactly what the Sigma switch is. It is double-sided. So I'm doing this because I want to use a lighter shade on my E27, but I just used that darker brown, and I don't want that to mix with the shade I'm about to dip into. I'm just going to swirl my brush on my Sigma switch in circular motions, and this is getting all of the pigment off the brush so I can switch between eyeshadow colors. So the brush will still look stained, but if I rub it on my hand, no pigment is going to come off of this brush. I think I want to stick to a matte eyeshadow look today. So I'm going to pick up Bare again on the flat side of this E27, and I'm covering the whole flat side like that. And this shade's going to go on the inner part of my lid, just to kind of brighten this up and give me a really soft gradient from light to kind of a medium deep shade. You can also use a shimmer for this step if you'd like to, but I think today I'm just kind of in a matte mood. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my first brush I started with. This is the E25, and I'm not going to pick up any more eyeshadow. I'm just going to kind of blend through the crease one more time just to make sure that everything looks really smooth. So like I said in the beginning of this video, I like to start with my eyes, and now I'm currently in the process of doing my base makeup and my under eye concealer. And I like to use my concealer to kind of clean up the edges of my eyeshadow and give me a really nice guide to follow. So I'm blending my concealer under my eye as normal, but right out here, I'm going to relax my face and kind of follow the line of my lower lash line up towards my temple. And I don't actually apply any eyeshadow primer to my lower lash line. I find that my concealer and my powder does a really good job at making my eyeshadow stick and last on my lower lash line. I'm going to take that same e.l.f. powder I used on my eyelid and apply that under my eye to again set my concealer and make my lower lash line ready for eyeshadow. Now for the lower lash line, I'm going to switch to the E42 brush, which again is in my brush set. And I like to think of this brush as kind of like a blending pencil brush. So it's going to do a really good job at applying and blending shadows on the lower lash line. I'm going to go back to my transition shade on the tip of this brush, and I'm going to start to blend that eyeshadow across my entire lower lash line. And make sure to take your time when you're working on the lower lash line, because this is such a small area to work on that you don't want to be doing like big blending movements. Just keep the brush movements nice and small. I'm going to go back to my medium brown shade again on the tip of this brush, and I'm just going to press that along the outer part of my lower lash line. You can go all the way towards the inner corner if you want to, but I just prefer this eyeshadow shape on myself. And again, I'm using the tip of this brush. So I accidentally blended a little bit lower than I would like to. See how right here it's nice and close, and right here it's a little farther down, but no worries, it's really easy to fix. I'm just gonna go back to my very light eyeshadow on that same E33, and I'm gonna use this as kind of like an eyeshadow eraser and just blend right on top of that. And since I'm here with this light eyeshadow, I am going to bring that shadow again towards my temple, just to make sure it's nice and blended on this outer part of my eye. And I will do the same thing on this eye, even though I didn't make that mistake. I do want to pick up a lighter shade on my E42, so I'm going to use my Sigma switch to get the pigment off of this brush. Now I'm going to take my shimmery highlight shade for my eyes. I'm going to use Bright from my palette, again on the tip of the brush, and that's going to go right on the inner corner. And I'm just kind of doing a little circular motion. And I like to add a little bit of highlighter right under the arch of my brow, but be very careful with this and don't add too much. And again, make sure you're using a small brush, because if you apply too much of this highlight shade and maybe bring it down a bit lower, it can actually make your eyes look even more kind of saggy looking. So this highlight shade helps to lift up the eye. So just a little bit right under the brow. The last step I like to do with pretty much any eyeshadow look is apply either a black or dark brown eyeshadow to my lash line. So for this, I'm going to grab a small angled brush. This is a Sigma E65. I want to do a dark brown today, so I'm going to take Cold Brew from the palette and picking that up on the tip of the brush. And I'm just going to stamp that along the outer part of my top lash line. I find that eyeshadow is a lot more forgiving as an eyeliner versus some kind of liquid pen or something like that. Using an eyeshadow just looks much softer. And I will even do this step on top of a liquid liner if I feel like it's looking a little harsh. Alright, that is it for eyeshadow. I'm gonna go apply some mascara. So I went ahead and applied mascara just on my top lashes. Today I used the Too Faced Better Than Sex mascara. Here is what the full face looks like with the eyes completed. I love how this turned out. It is perfect for beginners and beautiful for every day. So I hope you learned some helpful tips and tricks for your eyeshadow. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.